Hello, this is Mark Smith with Family Tree Counseling Associates, and I'm going to be speaking to you today on this video about 10 common shame spirals. These are actually common to me, but people are people, and I think you'll see that some of the things that press my shame buttons probably are pretty common to mankind in general. I want to start by reading a little piece that for me sort of defines shame, and it was something that I came up with yesterday in a writing class. We were asked to embody a trait of something, and one of the women brought up the subject of shame. So I tried to put a physical embodiment to shame, and I think it captures shame pretty well. So pardon me, I am going to read it, and then I'll get into the examples about shame spirals. So, excuse me. Shame is an ominous pitch black cloud that relentlessly smothers you wherever you go. This dark cloud makes it absolutely impossible to see things as they really are. It distorts reality into something far, far more negative, cancerous, critical, and hopeless than it is or it ever could be. Shame stealthily sneaks up on vulnerable people with every intention of destroying them. Shame shoves gun barrels into mouths and necks into nooses. Shame is the world's best liar. It can convince a sweet, virtuous woman that she's evil and vile beyond redemption. It can convince a perfectly good and successful man that he's a hapless loser who will never amount to anything. Shame is a plague that haunts almost everyone on the planet to one degree or another. There is nothing redemptive, healing, or life-giving about the deceptive, destructive, soul-murdering, dark energy of shame. So that's shame. It is a really destructive force, and it's being written about more and more in our society. So let me give you 10 ways that shame shows itself with me, and like I said, you'll probably hear some things that sound familiar. The first thing is when I feel shamed, I turn beet red, and sometimes I'll break out into a sweat. So shame affects you physiologically. It's usually if I've been the butt of a joke, or if I've done something particularly not very intelligent. Walk into a room with my fly unzipped, walk out of a bathroom with the toilet paper, attached to your foot or something. I mean, silly things, but it's more than embarrassment, and then everybody knows that I'm feeling shame because it's so physiological. Another area that it's sort of odd that feels shaming is occasionally in a social setting, there'll be a fella, and he usually has a full head of hair. He'll look at me with sort of a condescending smile, and then sort of empathizes with the poor bald guy, and I feel a little wave of shame about that. But the truth is, I like being bald. It's low maintenance. I like it. I don't really have any bad self-esteem. People assume if you're bald that you feel bad about it. I don't. It's cool with me, you know. But when somebody makes that comment, it's like they're projecting shame onto you, and you can still feel it even if it's not true. That's sort of the power of being shamed. So another issue that happens, and this does sort of bother me, and body image, as I've been doing research online, is probably the #1 area where people struggle and have issues around shame. But just this morning I met a friend of mine for breakfast, and he was standing in line waiting to be seated, and he sort of patted his belly when he saw me, and what he was saying was, "You've been on a cruise, you're off your diet, and I can see that you put 5 pounds back on." And he didn't even say a word. He just patted his belly. And he's a lot like my family members. They would do that. And so yeah, I felt shamed. I mean, say hi, ask me how the cruise was. Then you might reach over and pat my belly and say, "Did you put on a few, buddy?" That would feel better than just the first thing that's noticed is, "Hey, you got fatter." You know, so that was a little bitty shaming incident for me. Here's a good one, and I don't know if other people have experienced this, but occasionally, and it's not because I have like bad credit or anything. Occasionally, like in Sam's Club, I can never get a credit card to work, and there's nothing wrong with the credit cards. They work everywhere else. But if I get a credit card declined, I am mortified. I want to crawl under the cart and hide. I have that physiological turning beet red, and I'm assuming that the cashier thinks that I'm some loser, and they don't care. You know, they don't have an investment in judging me, but I get hit with a wave of shame that is just overwhelming. And to where I've been known to cut up cards, I've been known to not go back to a particular establishment because I feel so much shame and pain related to that incident. Another example for me, and I blogged and made a video about divorce shame. Where I live now, on the way to where I work, the offices of Family Tree Counseling, my old neighborhood is right in between. And if I have an early client, an 8:30, 9 o'clock client, that's early for me, and traffic is pretty heavy, I can skip a long line at a roundabout by cutting through my old neighborhood, and when I do that, I drive right past the house that I lived in when I was married. It's a beautiful house. Looks a little bit like Tony Soprano's house in the show. And by the way, God bless, James Gandolfino. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but missed the show. Loved him. Sorry, he passed away. So it was a beautiful house. It had a pool, but I drive by and I feel sad and I feel shame, because it reminds me of divorce and divorce. I think there's levels of shame. I think I have a lot of shame resilience in a lot of areas, to use a term by Brene Brown. She calls, instead of calling it shame recovery, she calls it shame resilience, which I maybe like a little better even than shame recovery. So I think I have a lot of shame resilience around being divorced, but I do get a little ouchy driving by that big house. So, um, shame and regret are mighty close to each other at times. Because if you deeply regret something, it's painful, you're reflective, it stays with you. There's a heaviness to it, but it is redemptive, and there is a resolve to be better, do better, be healthier. So I do have some regrets as I look back. I've been a therapist for 27 years in the Indianapolis area, and there are some cases I look back on that I could have done a better job on. I had a blind spot. I just didn't see something that was there, and sometimes I move over into shame about that. I wish I could roll back the hands of time and be wiser and be healthier, be a better professional, and but I think that if you strive to do good work in your job, in your career, then there's always the sort of the one that got away. There's always the the account you didn't close, or if you're a physician or a surgeon, the life you didn't save, and it can haunt you. I don't know if you guys remember, many of you remember the show MASH. Maybe younger people saw it on reruns, but Hawkeye, in one of his most famous scenes, was fighting to keep a man alive, and he said he didn't want to let the bastard win. And someone asked him who he was talking about. He was talking about death. And with most of my clients, it's not life or death. With some of them, it is. And so I do have some shame about, where I could have done better. And I think that's a common occurrence. And the goal is to keep your remorse and always strive to do a better job and to serve people better in your work, but not to shame yourself and not to beat up on yourself for not being perfect. So the seventh example I want to give of shame is in competing with unsafe people. We have a game in my family that we play called Double Deck Bid Euchre. It's like euchre on steroids. And my family, they tend to be large, charge, grandiose, and trash talking. And so if the cards fall your way, you sort of look smart, and but if they don't, then there's harsh words and criticism and embarrassment, and basically what it is shame. And that's an grounded in facet of my family that I wish that it was okay to lose. I watched a movie last night. I think it was called Legendary, and it was about a high school kid who was a wrestler, and his brother trained him, and it followed the stereotypical, puny kid learns to fight, and he has a Mr. Miyagi in the background, and then he wins, and everybody cries. Except this time he didn't win. He got to the championship. He came this close to winning, and I liked it, because what they were saying is, you don't have to be in first place to be a winner, and it's okay to deal with losing. And in my family, we could use a lot more graciousness when it comes to not always winning. A classic example of shame is being overly defensive. And for couples, that is where shame really interrupts the communication process. I wrote an article many years ago, and it was a play on John Bradshaw's famous book about shame, healing the shame that binds you, and I called it Healing the Shame That Blinds You. And when your significant other, when your spouse is projecting their stuff onto you, it may or may not be true, it doesn't matter. But if it hits on your shame, then you're going to become reactive, you're going to stop listening, you're not going to be empathetic, you're not going to enter into their world, you're going to be combative, you're throwing a rock back at them, they're going to throw a rock back at you. What I've learned in my significant other, Betsy, and I were involved in imago therapy together, and what I've learned is you don't have to get defensive, you don't have to set the record straight. Just know that that's how your partner feels, and empathize with them, and what you'll get is communication that's 100 times better by not having that big shame button right in the middle of your head where your spouse can whack it. You just hear them out, and we actually are trained to sort of parrot back to them. So, honey, what I hear you saying is that you don't like it when I spend too much money on my kids because it feels like I'm not taking care of you. Do I have that correctly? Is there more? So I don't have to get defensive, and that's a wonderful gift, and it will reduce the amount of conflict in your marriage tremendously. The other two are related to duty. A couple years ago I was big into P90X, and I have every intention of getting back into it. I just haven't, and I feel some shame. I think there's a lot of exercise shame in the world, and again it goes back to what's the difference between remorse and shame. You know, remorse and guilt is tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you know, that would be good for you. But shame says, you know, you're a big old fatty, and you know you're probably going to have a heart attack, and you know you're not very good because you're not doing your P90X. And the other thing that brings up shame for me is I have a writing office that I'm in right now. This is I call it world headquarters for relationship jazz. But it's my writing office, but I have a business office for just running the home. And when it gets covered over with papers, then yeah, I start to feel a lot of shame, and sometimes it haunts me in my sleep because and my chest tightens up because I'm behind, and I'm pressured then to clean that up. And again, some of that is guilt that says, you know, you better make sure those bills get paid, young man. But some of it is a darker, more critical, more scary, ominous thing, and that's what I was trying to get at in the earlier reading that I did. That shame it makes the world dark. It makes it ominous. It makes it more scary than it really is. So those are 10 common shame spirals that I experience, but I think a lot of people experience around duty, around defensiveness, around body image, around divorce, around making mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes in life, and it's okay to make mistakes and to lose every once in a while. So I want to encourage you to sign up to subscribe for our YouTube channel, Family Tree Counseling. Visit our website, familytreecounseling.com. I have 5 books there that are available for sale, including a book on abandonment called Managing Abandonment Issues Through Recovery. And I have my Shane book coming out in September. I'm a little behind. I've had a lot going on this summer with my kids and travel, and I'm a little behind, so I hope I get it done by September. I'm not going to shame myself if it's October, but we'll see how that goes. So thank you for watching the video, and God bless.